fuel container designed in 1937 that remains so superior to modern alternatives that militaries worldwide still use essentially the same design more than 80 years later. The German Jerry can solve every problem that fuel transport presented, and despite decades of technological advancement and billions of dollars spent on alternatives, nobody has managed to build anything better. When you understand why this simple steel container works so well, you also understand why the plastic gas cans sitting in most garages represent a dramatic step backward in design. Before the jerrycan existed, fuel transport was a logistics nightmare that could determine the outcome of battles. British and American forces used rectangular tin containers that soldiers nicknamed flimsies, and the name was deserved. These containers leaked at the seams. They punctured when dropped. They corroded within months. They couldn't be stacked without crushing. Reports from the North African campaign suggested that Allied forces lost 30 to 40% of their fuel before it ever reached the vehicles that needed it, not from enemy action, but simply from container failures. The Germans recognized this problem years before the war began. Mechanized warfare would depend on fuel logistics, and fuel logistics would depend on containers that actually worked. In 1937, an engineer named Vinzenz Grunvogel at the Müller engineering firm in Schwelm, Germany, designed a container that addressed every failure mode the military had identified. By the time Germany invaded Poland in 1939, millions of these containers sat in warehouses, ready to fuel the blitzkrieg. Let's examine exactly what makes this container so effective. Number one, the shape that solves everything. The jerrycan is rectangular with rounded edges and corners, a shape that seems simple until you consider how many problems it solves simultaneously. Rectangular containers stack efficiently. They pack into truck beds, ship holds, and storage areas with minimal wasted space. Round containers leave gaps. Odd shapes waste volume. The jerrycan's flat sides and consistent dimensions mean that every cubic foot of storage space gets used. But rectangular containers face a problem. Flat surfaces are structurally weak. A flat steel panel will bow outward under pressure and inward under vacuum. Temperature changes cause fuel to expand and contract, creating exactly these pressure variations. A container that bulges when warm and collapses when cold will eventually fail at the seams. The solution is the distinctive X-shaped indentation pressed into each side of the jerrycan. These indentations serve multiple functions simultaneously. They allow the sides to flex inward and outward as contents expand and contract, accommodating temperature changes without stressing the seams. They add structural rigidity to what would otherwise be weak flat panels. They create a surface that resists bowing under pressure, and they provide a better grip surface for handling. Number two, the three-handle system. Most fuel containers have one handle. The jerrycan has three, and this seemingly simple difference enables handling capabilities that single-handle designs cannot match. The central handle sits directly over the container's center of gravity when full. Lift the can by this handle and it hangs perfectly vertical, balanced, and stable. A single person can carry a full jerrycan, approximately 36 pounds, over considerable distances without the container swinging or pulling to one side. The two outer handles serve multiple purposes. They allow carrying two full jerrycans simultaneously, one in each hand, with a handle from each can gripped together. They enable two people to carry one very heavy can by each taking an outer handle, and they allow empty cans to be carried in quantity, 3 nested in each hand by their handles. Perhaps most importantly, the handle design enables bucket brigade transfer. A line of soldiers or workers can pass full jerry cans from hand to hand rapidly, with each person grabbing an outer handle as the can comes toward them and releasing it as the next person grips the other outer handle. This simple capability dramatically accelerates fuel distribution in field conditions. Number 3, the cam lever closure. The top of the jerry can features a closure system that modern container designers have somehow failed to match despite decades of attempts. A cam lever mechanism with a securing pin opens and closes the spout without threading, without tools, and without any possibility of cross-threading or stripping. Push the lever one direction and the lid opens. Push it the other direction and the lid closes. A pin drops through a hole to lock the lever in the close position. The entire operation takes 2 seconds and can be performed while wearing heavy gloves in freezing conditions. The seal created by this mechanism is positive and complete. Properly closed, a jerry can be inverted, dropped, thrown, and rolled without leaking a drop. The gasket that creates this seal is replaceable, meaning a jerry can that starts leaking can be repaired rather than discarded. Compare this to modern plastic gas can closures. Threaded caps cross-thread constantly. Plastic threads strip and wear. Self-closing spout mechanisms, mandated by EPA regulations, jam, stick, leak, and fail. Consumers spend more time fighting with modern gas can spouts than actually pouring fuel. Online forums overflow with complaints about modern gas can designs that spill more fuel than they save through their supposedly emission-reducing features. The jerry can closure solved this problem in 1937, and no subsequent design has worked as reliably. Number 4, the air pipe that enables smooth pouring. Inside every jerry can, an air pipe runs from the spout opening down the back of the container to the bottom of the opposite side. This pipe is invisible from outside and easy to overlook, but it represents perhaps the most clever feature of the entire design. When you pour liquid from a container, air must enter to replace the departing liquid. Without adequate air intake, liquid pours in surges and glugs as air bubbles fight past outflowing fuel. The jerky flow makes controlled pouring difficult and creates splashing and spillage. The jerry can's air pipe solves this completely. As fuel pours out through the main opening, air flows in through the pipe, entering at the back bottom of the container where it cannot interfere with the outflowing fuel. The result is smooth, continuous flow that empties the container quickly and completely without glugging, splashing, or the need to hold the container at awkward angles. Modern plastic gas cans typically require a separate vent that must be opened before pouring. Many users forget to open the vent and wonder why fuel won't flow properly. The vents themselves often leak or malfunction. Some modern designs eliminated separate vents entirely in response to emission regulations, creating containers that pour even more poorly. The internal air pipe means a jerry can needs no separate vent. The container is sealed against evaporative emissions when closed, yet pours perfectly when open. Both needs are met by a single elegant design element. Number 5, material advantages. The original jerry can was made from 0.9 mm pressed steel, hot-dipped galvanized or painted for corrosion resistance. This material choice provides advantages that plastic simply cannot match. Steel resists puncture. Drop a steel jerry can on a rock and it dents. Drop a plastic container on the same rock and it may crack or puncture entirely. The steel can be hammered back into shape or even welded if damaged. The plastic is ruined. Steel maintains structural integrity across decades of service. Original World War II jerry cans remain functional today, more than 80 years after manufacture. Plastic containers become brittle with age and sun exposure, typically lasting 5 to 10 years. Before degradation makes them unsafe, steel does not react with petroleum fuels. Some plastics break down when exposed to gasoline over time, potentially contaminating the fuel and weakening the container. Steel is chemically inert to common fuels. Most critically, from a safety perspective, steel prevents static electricity buildup. Plastic containers can accumulate static charge, particularly in dry conditions. When that charge discharges as a spark during fueling, ignition of fuel vapors becomes possible. Metal containers remain grounded, eliminating this risk. Incidents of fires from static discharge during fueling, while rare, occur almost exclusively with plastic containers. Number 6. Why modern containers went wrong. If the jerry can design is so superior, why do most consumers end up with inferior plastic alternatives? The answer involves cost, regulation, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what container design should optimize for. Plastic containers cost less to manufacture than steel. They're lighter to ship. They satisfy consumer preference for low prices and easy handling. For the person who fills a gas can twice a year to run a lawnmower, the limitations of plastic may never become apparent. The market optimized for casual use and low cost rather than durability and performance. Regulatory intervention made matters worse, at least in the United States. Environmental Protection Agency regulations on portable fuel containers aim to reduce volatile organic compound emissions from evaporating gasoline. The regulations mandated self-closing spouts and other features intended to limit vapor release. The result has been containers that are dramatically harder to use, self-closing mechanisms that require constant pressure to keep open while pouring, restricted flow rates that make filling a tank take 4 times longer than necessary, complex spout assemblies that break, jam, and malfunction, safety features that actually increase spillage by making controlled pouring nearly impossible. Number 7. Continued professional preference. The clearest evidence that jerry can design remains superior is who still uses them. People and organizations whose lives and operations depend on reliable fuel transport have not switched to modern plastic alternatives. NATO forces worldwide continue using jerry cans meeting original design specifications. The container has a NATO stock number and remains standard equipment in military vehicles across member nations. Armies that could choose any container design in the world continue choosing the one developed in 1937. Fire departments use jerry cans for fuel transport. Emergency management agencies stockpile them for disaster response. In situations where container failure could mean lives lost, professionals choose proven reliability over modern convenience. Aviation operations, particularly at remote airstrips, rely on jerry cans for refueling small aircraft. Many aviation regulations require metal containers for fuel transport. The consequences of fuel contamination or container failure at a remote location make reliability non-negotiable. Motorsports teams use jerry cans for pit lane refueling, where seconds matter and spills are unacceptable. Racing sanctioning bodies often require metal containers. The quick pour capability of a properly designed jerry can beat any plastic alternative in time-critical refueling. Number 8. The design principles that made it possible. The jerry can succeed because its designer understood that every feature must serve a purpose. The rectangular shape enables stacking. The rounded corners prevent stress failure. The X-pattern indentations accommodate expansion and add rigidity. The 3 handles enable multiple carrying methods. The cam lever closure seals positively without threads. The internal air pipe enables smooth pouring. The steel construction provides durability, chemical resistance, and safety. Nothing on a jerry can is decorative. Nothing is there for marketing appeal. Every element exists because it solves a specific problem. This ruthless functionalism produces a container that does exactly what it needs to do in exactly the conditions it will face. Modern container design often reverses these priorities. Features get added for marketing differentiation. Costs get cut by reducing material quality. Regulations get satisfied through mechanisms that compromise usability. The result is products that look modern but perform poorly. The jerry can represents a design philosophy that prioritizes function over everything else. This philosophy produced a container so effective that 8 decades of subsequent engineering have failed to improve on it. A steel container with 3 handles, an X pattern on its sides, a cam lever closure, and an internal air pipe, designed by a German engineer preparing his country for mechanized warfare, captured by Allied forces who immediately recognized its superiority, copied and produced by the millions, adopted as the worldwide military standard, still in production, still in use, still unmatched after more than 80 years. The jerry can proves that good design doesn't become obsolete. The problems it solved in 1937, storing and transporting fuel without loss, damage, or difficulty, remain exactly the same problems that fuel containers face today. The solution that worked then works now because physics hasn't changed, fuel hasn't changed, and the need for reliability hasn't changed. Modern containers offer lower prices and lighter weight. The jerry can offer something more valuable: the certainty that it will work when you need it to, every time, for as long as you live, and probably longer. That's what design excellence looks like. Thanks for watching.